All right. What's up, everybody? How you doing out there? Welcome back to the show. This is last week's fight. My name is Thinker St. James, and tonight I will be going over every single fight from UFC 312, Plessis versus Strickland 2. Doing the show solo today. Chase has died once again. RIP to Chase. You know, it was a good run, but all good things must come to an end, and we will be holding funeral services next week. So, you know, it's sad sometimes that you lose a co-host like that, but open auditions now for the new co-host of last week's fights. If you want to join the show and replace Chase Parton, here's your opportunity. So get your applications in now, and maybe we'll work something out. Oh, speaking of which, there's Chase in the chat. How you doing, brother? Yeah, of course, Chase is taking the night off. He's not feeling too well, but your boy Thinker is here, of course, and we're going to be going over each and every fight from UFC 312, which, of course, was Plessis versus Strickland 2. And the first thing that jumped off of the page to me, as far as things I wanted to mention here, was it just me, or did this event sound a lot louder as far as the impact sounds went? Like, the in-cage action at this event seemed like it was amplified a lot more than other events. I don't know if it was just our perception. Commentary was kind of talking about it too, but man, when they were cracking in there, it sounded like baseball bats just left and right. I mean, firecracker hits from like the opening fight all the way on. Like when Anshul Jubli got knocked out, which we'll talk about in a second here, like that shot from Sal killed was very noticeably loud, and it maintained that impact throughout the entirety of the event, I thought anyway. But either which way, we'll be talking about all of these fights. Of course, if you want to talk about anything else in the chat, really right now, I guess would be a good time to make it a little bit more open. So, we'll keep sticking to the fights that we're talking about at the moment, but we'll kind of see where the chat goes. You can kind of co-host from the chat a little bit since I am riding solo on this one. But either which way, we're going to get into it. And of course, as I mentioned, the first fight of the evening was Quillan Salkeld versus Anshul Jubli. I guess before I should get into that, we should say UFC 312 Plessis versus Strickland 2 took place at the Kudos Arena in Sydney, Australia. Good crowd down in Sydney. Kind of upset for Sydney that they ended up getting this caliber of a card, because I do think that the initial assessments of it turned out to be kind of true. The name value certainly was not there, and it was okay. I mean, like, it wasn't a bad event. Because I had people in the chat during the watch along saying, "Oh, this card's delivering, it's delivering." I'm like, it delivered in certain aspects, I would say, but like it was more individual performances as opposed to banger fights, in my opinion. There were a couple of really good performances. There was definitely one fight that was an absolute banger, but like as far as consistency goes, when the fights are concerned, fight over fight, I didn't think that it was like a stacked card full of bangers. So I would put this solidly in the mid range. I'd say it was maybe like a 6.5 out of 10 personally. Yeah, random city and random state player coming soon. Yeah, exactly. We're getting the co-host situation sorted out as we speak. So either get well or get replaced. Um, Toby says, I fell asleep for the DDP fight. Is it worth a rewatch or was Lucas Tracy right? It's a 50-45 to DDP. It is worth a rewatch to see just how good Dricus is, I would say. But it is pretty much just that. I mean, it's worth it to see Sean Strickland get his nose broken and have to reset it with his own hands. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to get much of like a spirited back and forth or anything there. Of course, we'll get into the main event in a little bit, but yeah, rewatch at your own risk, I would say. But I think that there is some value there just to see how dominant Dricus is now and is going to probably continue to be, Hamzat aside. So we'll have to see how that one works out, of course. But the fight itself went pretty well how I had expected it to go. And as I mentioned, we'll get into that in a little bit. So starting off this thing with Quillen Salkeld versus Anshul Jubli. This was a very quick one. This was a 19-second knockout here. Quillen Salkeld, overhand right directly on the ear, just drops Jubli. He shoots for a leg, but the fight is stopped. I would say that this was an early stoppage. We were debating it a little bit in the Discord. In the moment, it didn't feel like that early of a stoppage, but if I like after watching the replay of it and seeing like the motions as it went down, I do think that it was a little bit of an early stoppage. It wasn't egregiously early. Like he didn't step in like as he was falling or anything. But if you go through and rewatch the sequence of events there, Jubli gets hit in the side of the head. Of course, this is 19 seconds in, so everything kind of taking place in quick succession. But he gets hit in the side of the head. He goes down. He sort of does do like a slight fetal position. That was the big note that everyone was saying. Oh, he went into the fetal position. His body just kind of naturally did that. But after he hit the mat, he instantly started going for the leg. Like by the time he was going for the leg, the ref had already stepped in, but had the ref not stepped in, he would have been back enough to go for the leg. So I think that this was a little bit of an early stoppage. I don't think that it necessarily would have gone any differently. I mean, Jubli is unfortunately a dude who is at the earliest stages of mixed martial arts in his region. And because of that, he's almost like the prototype for male Indian fighters right now. I mean, like, or at least the patient zero, I guess is a better way to put it. He's the first one to be doing it at a massive scale. He's a dude who has probably not had the level of competition that a lot of fighters starting out get. I guess he was a road to the UFC guy, so he had some there. Props to him for fighting those guys that come up through that system. But even those guys who are in regions that are a little more established, like China and Japan, he's probably not even getting the level of competition outside of that event that other guys are getting outside of that tournament. Does that make sense? Inside the tournament, he gets that level, but outside of it, not as much. And now he's thrown into the UFC with like absolute killers, even though, of course, Salkeld is coming off of the Contender Series. So you'd think they're somewhat even footing, I would guess. But I think that Salkeld is coming out of a system that's a little more established. And you could tell that he is a dude who I mean, at least can place a nice shot. I mean, that's all you really can tell from a performance like that. Nice quick KO starts the evening off, and it's very nice to see, but doesn't really give us a full-on impression of how Salkeld's going to perform against guys who are not Anshul Jubli. And then, of course, Anshul Jubli, it's back to the drawing board, and I would think maybe one more fight before you got to cut this guy. The unfortunate aspect of it is that he is rocking for his entire country, right? He's the first major Indian fighter that we've had on the roster, at least in a very long time. I think there's been an Indian fighter before, but that might have been like in the golden era. So either way, he's got a lot of weight on his shoulders, carrying an entire country. And you want to see a guy like that succeed. But this is also the guy that got barked down into breaking mentally by Mike Breeden at the Islam versus Volk 2 card. So this dude's record is really starting to reflect poorly on him. And it's only going to get worse if the losses keep adding up. So nice first effort for Quillen Salkeld. That definitely is the way that you want to start off your run in the UFC, competition aside. Anshul Jubli, yeah, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets maybe one more fight just to really give him the old college try. But it's going to really need to be a hand-picked opponent. That's going to be the dude that he can beat. And I don't know if the organization is going to go for that. That would be my assessment there. I think that the issue, too, is that Jubli is very much a robotic, by the book, very technical. He's a very technically proficient fighter. Not in this fight, of course. Obviously, the defense was not there. But if you watched him in the Breeden fight, he's very mechanical in his movements because he understands the game well enough to perform it, but doesn't have the quickness on his feet. He's not adapting within the fight. He's not adjusting when he needs to. He's not changing strategies when he needs to. And then, of course, if he's able to be broken mentally, that's a huge problem. So Anshul Jubli, I would be surprised if he sticks around that much longer, but I do think he'll probably get one more fight. When is Trump going to invade Canada? Don't know, don't care. That's y'all's problem. All right, moving on to Kevin Jousset versus Jonathan Mikhailov. This was a pretty decent fight. I think that some of the more quality fights were earlier in this card. The prelims were really kind of where it was at. Never skip the undercard is always the rule around these parts, and this is a card that certainly proved that. Kevin Jousset versus Jonathan Mikhailov. Nice kick exchanges in the first. I mean, really, the kicks were the story of this fight. Mikhailov got the better of them for the majority of it, I would say. Jousset had a couple of decent ones in there, a couple of decent little flurries in there too, if I recall. But really, Mikhailov was dictating a lot of the pace of the fight early, and by the time that Jousset was able to come around, it was already too late. Mikhailov got the better of the kicking exchanges early, not only because he dropped Jousset in the first round, but also because Jousset was wearing the damage extremely heavily. If you saw Jousset's side, he was all kinds of ripped up under his arm. The welting and the red marks were very noticeable. Now, of course, that's because of the effectiveness of Mikhailov's kicks, but also because Jousset is about as white as Elmer's glue. So he will be wearing it a lot more than other fighters. He was wearing it all over his body. In fact, if you look at this little image here on ESPN where it shows they do these heat maps of the damage here, how red his body is there. In parts, that was how red his body was in real life. So decent point fighting for Mikhailov in the second round. Going forward, Jousset was lagging in the attacks, I would say. Jousset finally starts to show some urgency in his offense in the third, but not enough. Really, just a nice debut from Mikhailov. Pretty much a kick machine. He leaves himself open a little bit, so like another fighter will probably be able to capitalize on that a little bit more. But for the fight that he had, I think Mikhailov showed a good amount of heart. I think it was a pretty decent performance. Had to go the distance, so it was a full on scrap that he had to get through in order to get to the victory, which he got. In his Octagon interview, he said something along the lines of, "You haven't seen half of what I'm capable of." Now, this is something that I wanted to talk about Chase with, because this is the type of statement that I do not like to hear from fighters. I don't appreciate that kind of thing, and I'll tell you why. The reason is that you had the opportunity in this fight to show everything that you're capable of. I mean, if you're trying to give respect to your opponent and say, "Oh, he was too tough. I wasn't able to get my plan off the way I wanted to," then I guess there's something to that. But the way that he was making it sound was more like, "Guys, if you liked this, you ain't seen nothing yet." And it's like, well, I could have seen everything right now. It reminds me of in battle rap, come from battle rap myself. There is a battle rapper named Tay Rock, and one of his catchphrases is "That's light." He'll say after some bars, some hardcore bars, he'll drop some bars, whatever, and be like, "That's light." And every time that he says that, I'm always like, well, when does the heavy stuff start? like, so I don't know. I just thought that there was some parallel there because I'm like, you have your opportunity right then and there to show everything that you want to show. Go out there and get the finish. Why did you not finish there if there's still so much more that you're capable of? Granted, he could be saying things like, oh, I'm still young in the game. I'm still learning. That's fine. But you can say that instead. If you're saying that, oh, there's so much more that I could have done, then just do it. Come out in the next fight and just do it, I guess, if you're not going to do it in this fight. But either way, I don't know. That's just one of those things that kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. Not too big of a deal. Mikhailov seems like a good enough kid. So we'll see what ends up happening with his next fight. But you say, I believe, is now on a 2-fight losing streak. Is that correct? Yeah. 2-fight losing streak, won to Brian Battle. Of course, that ages pretty well, but lost to a dude on the Contender Series, or coming off of the Contender Series, of course. Not exactly the greatest look. So Jusei needs to be careful here. He's representing all of France. Got his country on his back, too. Of course, we've got some pretty good fighters coming out of France now, so he doesn't have so much of a burden to shoulder, but still, you're rocking for an entire country when you're an underrepresented country in the game. So Jusei needs to make sure that he comes out correct next time, or he might be finding himself on the wrong side of the chopping block as well. Moving on. This was a fucking war. This is fight of the night for sure. I guess I should say here that 3 performance bonuses, or three bonuses given out to 3 Contender Series debuters or debutantes. You had fight of the night here for Cody Steele and Rongju. You had Talashin Teixeira getting a performance of the night bonus. And who was the third one? Was it Tom Nolan? I don't know. Oh no, and Quillen Salkill. Duh. Yeah, and Quillen Salkill for the knockout of Anshul Jubli. So 3 guys coming off of the Contender Series, 3 guys getting bonuses. That's nice to see. Obviously, it's showing that there are dudes who are coming into the organization at a level that you want them to be at to compete at the highest levels here. So very nice. But anyway, back to Cody Steele versus Rongju. What a performance this was on both sides. Rock'em, sock'em, robots, the 2 of these guys. I did not realize that they had trained together at some point in the recent past. So obviously there was some awareness of their styles and basically what they could be expecting from one another. But probably didn't play all that much of a factor in this fight, I would say, because really these guys were just running gunning. So you can train with a guy all you want. If you're not in full force fighting, if you're not hard sparring to the point of trying to really knock each other out, then you're not going to be anticipating what they were doing because they were really lobbing shots. This was really, really fun to see. Very nice defensive grappling from Rongju to negate the takedowns of Steele is the first note, because Steele, this is one of those notes too that is starting to really drive me wild. I am sick and fucking tired of hearing that guys have great BJJ, have great wrestling, but you just never see it because they don't need to use it. If they don't use it, it doesn't exist, at least to me. I don't care what you can do in the gym. If you're not doing it in the octagon in the middle of these actual fights, then it might as well be fucking fairy dust, because these dudes come out here and they get into these situations where they're taking extreme amounts of damage in one department and then don't switch it up. It's like, that's supposed to be your thing in the back pocket. That's supposed to be the thing that you have at the ready so that you can adjust the course of the action. If they're not going to use it, then it might as well be smoke and mirrors. I don't believe it anymore. But anyway, I say all of that to say that Steele does have ostensibly at least. I mean, based on what we have heard, he's won a number of competitions. He's got good BJJ and good wrestling as well. But he was not able to take Rongju down early, and then he just abandoned that game plan altogether, and it was straight rock'em sock'em robot for the remainder of the fight, basically. They were trading for real, clean boxing from Rongju. Great defense in that department as well. Rongju's boxing was really top notch. I will fully admit I thought that Steele was a lock in this one because Rongju is another dude coming off of the road to UFC. Rongju 26-6. I had to believe that there was some can crushing going on in this record. I mean, we're talking some of this stuff down here. It's like, I mean, all of these guys are I guess listed fighters, but you know what I mean? Like this dude, Ruslan Khairulin, lost to Rongju, lost to whoever that is. You know what I'm saying? Like I would think that there was some can crushing and there would have been some potential for Rongju to get rocked by the newcomer here. Of course, Rongju coming off of the loss to Cody Steele, and that was his only other fight actually in the organization proper. So I think that my thought process made sense for this one. However, you let this Rongju guy get his way when it comes to the boxing, and boy, is it something to look at because the dude is really, really nice with his striking. And in the Padilla fight, the way, like, I'd have to go back because we talked about this on the last episode of the show. I have to see what that fight was looking like beforehand. But if I recall, Padilla landed like this overhand elbow, basically like an up and over elbow. That was the thing that like shut Rongju's eye and basically made it so that the fight had to be stopped. But I think that he was doing some pretty decent work before that too. So I don't know if Rongju just needed the right opponent to let his striking go or whatever the adjustments that he made were, or maybe it's just because Cody Steele is kind of green. Either way, he was doing his damn thing when it came to the boxing. Steele, on the other hand, while still landing some nice shots, mind you, because this kid was throwing some really heavy stuff. A different opponent would have been in really, really bad shape under the punches that Steele was tossing out there. But the thing that he was doing that I think was problematic for him was that he was loading up his shots and he was swinging pretty wild, which I think ended up gassing him a little early in the fight. And when you got a guy like Rongju, who I guess can just stay in there and has a really good gas tank, that's just where it ended up going. He was able to navigate all of that early. It looked like Steele was really trying to finish the fight early, which was not the right strategy to take. And then once he was a little bit farther down the line and Rongju was defending everything really nicely, he wasn't adjusting the way that he needed to adjust. And that, I think, is ultimately why he did not win this thing. I think it was more game planning than it was his proficiency, because I think Steele has a lot of potential. I think that the fact that he stayed in this fight, did not get knocked out, shows that he had a really good chin because he took some heavy shots. I think that his striking, if he can tighten it up just a little bit, leads one to believe that he will be someone to look out for in the future. He needs to have that veteran experience as far as navigating a fight goes. He doesn't have it yet, and this is what you get, especially against a guy like Rongju, who is 26-6 now. Obviously, that's a pretty big discrepancy as far as skills go. But so Steele lands all of that stuff. Rongju lands all of his stuff, all those punches, and a point to the mat, stand and bang at the very end, a la Max Holloway. How could you not love this fight? Steele just needed to adjust. That's what I was saying just before. He needed to go back to his wrestling and grappling later in the fight. He didn't do that. That's unfortunate, but he was really having fun out there too. That's the last note that I have about it. Great chin on both of these guys. Really good fight, and I think Steele's going to come back better because of this fight. This is the exact type of loss that you want to take early. Really, I think that if you break it down, this is the exact type of loss that you want to take early if you're Cody Steele, because he has nothing to be ashamed of in this fight. Went through an absolute war, gained a ton of fans, I would hope. I mean, anybody who watched that fight probably came away from it like, yo, that dude's a fucking dog for real. And I mean, like, they should have. So, nothing lost necessarily except for your O. And that does suck. Of course, you never want to lose your 0, but um, not a terrible way for it to happen. He gains experience, he gains exposure. He gets a fight of the night bonus in his first fight in the organization. Definitely something to be said for that. So I think that this worked out just fine. And I think it was nice to be able to see Rongju do his thing too, because I don't think that you got to see enough of that in the Chris Padilla fight. I would have really overlooked him even harder had it not been for a fight like this. Now, the name Rongju will be in my mind. And as the Vitz King said, shout out to the Vitz King, he is the Rongju to fuck with. Good fight, but that's a bad prospect. Lost in Cody? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. For the reasons I just laid out, I think that that's a fine loss to take. And one loss on your record is not going to screw up your trajectory too bad. I think he'll be just fine. I think he's going to be just fine going forward. He just needs a little bit more experience. That's all. All right. Let's keep this train a moving here. Colby Thickness versus Alexandre Topuria. Alexandre Topuria, of course, the older brother of Ilya. Colby Thickness is a short notice replacement of Cody Haddon. He is a training partner of Alexander Volkanovski. And what I said about that is that for a guy who is just making his debut, I did not think that standing next to Alexander Volkanovski in the gym was going to make the difference. I was leaning a little bit more on the Topuria genes, but what we had said also is that out of siblings, there is always one that is going to be the forerunner between the two. Nick and Nate Diaz, Sergio and Anthony Pettis. I mean, the Nogueira brothers. There's a bunch of examples of siblings in this sport. Herbert and Gilbert Burns. Valentina and Antonina. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like there's always going to be one that rises above the other. I think that actually Henry, shout out to Henry from the Discord, he made the point that Anthony Pettis and Sergio Pettis is probably the closest that we've had to two that are somewhat neck and neck because they both held belts in organizations. So I'll give you that. But still, whenever you think of the name Pettis, it's generally going to be Showtime versus the brother. So anyway, Topuria, I would say, based on that fight, does not have the aura of the brother, but got the win. He did land the wobbler shot and a suplex in round 1. That was cool shit. But that was kind of where the cool shit sort of ended, I would say. This was not like, I don't know. This wasn't a like barn burner fight all the way through. I think a lot of the heavy stuff was in the first round. Thickness moves really nicely, but the power didn't seem to be there. So Topuria was kind of able to be more calm and poised, stronger when it counted, but didn't seem to have much killer instinct. That was the same note that Chase made about Peyton Talbot. And I'm starting to key in on that a little bit more too now, because a lot of times you see these guys who are very technically proficient, but if they don't have that driving force to go out and get the victory, you kind of end up with these less than super over the top impressive performances or fights overall, depending on who their opponent is and what they're experiencing as far as opposition goes. I would say that that's pretty much true of this one. Topuria's grappling wasn't overly impressive. Obviously, suplex is going to be very cool, but the suplex itself is not really. I mean, like it's kind of almost partially a wrestling deal, partially fast motion kind of stuff. So I mean, yes, it's wrestling, of course, but like I don't class it the same way as like chain wrestling or getting down into deeper grappling exchanges. And then when it finally got to the ground where the grappling is, the most prevalent, it wasn't anything that I was like, oh man, this guy is really a force to be reckoned with. Obviously, the striking is what you'd be expecting to be the stronger suit from a guy like Topuria with the Topuria genes, but he just seemed like a somewhat standard level bantamweight to me. That was really the assessment that I had coming out of this fight. He might be the older brother, but he's wearing little brother aura when it comes to him versus Ilya. That is just the assessment as of right now. Um, can he come back in another fight going forward and completely turn the narrative around? Perhaps, but it's going to need to be something very, very impressive when you're fighting a short notice fighter who's making his debut. Young guy in thickness. I thought the thickness was okay, but just okay. So if you're not finishing a fight with Colby thickness, then what are we going to see when you're fighting someone who's not that? I guess we're going to have to wait and see, but it didn't inspire any great deal of confidence going forward. I think that the odds for him are going to be pretty tight in upcoming fights, depending on who the competition is. But you see, at least on this book, a minus 370 favorite in this fight. I would say that there were some times that might have been a little bit dicey. I mean, not dicey to the point that like, oh, I'm going to lose this, but more like, yo, minus 370, he should be stomping this guy. And that just wasn't the case. So yeah, I think that Topuria is definitely going to be the lesser of the two as of right now. Of course, Ilya on top of the planet, so it is kind of one of those deals that he's coming in a lot later than Ilya. Whether or not he wants to go that far, they said it on the commentary. I guess both Topuria brothers are somehow pretty well off. I don't know what they do for money. I guess like Ilya's got some kind of business, and I guess maybe Alexandre also does. But regardless, the thing is that Alexandre Topuria claims that, he doesn't need to be fighting. He's just doing it for the love of the game. So if that's the case and he just wants to come in here, fight a couple of times, do his thing, not really worried about moving up in the rankings, trying to get a belt or any of that kind of stuff, then whatever, it's fine. But with that knowledge, you got to know that he is going to be coming into the next couple of fights as essentially a standard bantamweight when Ilya Topuria is the one that you really need to watch out for more. So that's all I really got to say about that one. Actually, no, it's not all I got to say about that one. The last note that I have was that Alexandre Alexandre Topuria needs to get some better advice when it comes to his hair. I was not a fan of that mop of hair that he had. He's got very thick hair, and it looked like it hadn't been cut, but you knew it was cut because his lineup in the back was the straightest line I have ever seen in my life. So this dude got a fresh cut, and that was the cut he got. Brother, we need to get you back to the drawing board. I'm not necessarily one to talk. I let my hair go wild, whatever. You're trying to be a little bit more prim and proper, or at least your brother is. I don't know. Maybe you want to be sort of looking like you're, a Postmates delivery guy. If that's the case, power to you. I'm just saying the hair was not working for me. So that's the last note that I have. Alexandre is the auraless brother, and the hair is not helping. So, El Conquistador, fire your barber. All right. Keeping this train moving, Wang Tong versus Bruna Brazil. This was the first fight that really pissed me the fuck off. This fight bothered the absolute hell out of me because Bruna did nothing. Bruna Brazil did not do a fucking thing in this fight. Sightseeing like a motherfucker. Whoever chose Bruna should be hanged. Absolute domination from Wang. Isn't Bruna a fighting nerd as well? Yes, I was going to talk about that too coming up here, so save that thought. But yeah, Bruna Brazil did nothing in this fight. It was really a lackluster performance by way of inactivity, and very much like the same notes that we had about Muin Gafarov. Not to say that Wang Tong and Muin Gafarov are on the same level, because I do think that Wang Tong has more potential to be like a force to be reckoned with in her division here, as a women's flyweight contender. Like, I think that there's definitely like potential for her. She's got to work on the ground game, of course, but she didn't have to do any of that in this fight. That's, I think, what everybody was thinking was going to happen, is that Bruna, as a fucking fighting nerd, as a Brazilian, a person who has the name Brazil, she's got the country in her surname. You would have thought that she would take this thing to the fucking ground and try to get Wang Tong to have to prove herself in that regard. She didn't do anything. She stood there. Yet another example of a fight where if one person does not want to engage, the other person will gladly pick up the slack, which is exactly what Wang Tong did. I mean, I'm really like it's starting to bother the hell out of me. I forget what other we had another female fighter that was Carol Hossa, right? Was it Carol Hossa? Which kills me because Carol Hossa was in an absolute war in the past, but that last fight that she had, she was standing doing absolutely nothing. What is up with this epidemic of women fighters who are going to be sitting in front of your face, not doing a fucking thing? Here, my opponent, here's my face. Why don't you punch it some? Here's my body. Why don't you kick it some? Absolute fucking bullshit, and it really bothered me. A note that I have in here to exemplify just how much of a bullshit fight this was at times. In the second round, the commentary team, you know how it is when they start the round and DC is talking his dumb shit that has nothing to do with the fight, and he's laughing, he's doing his kind of, uncle laugh that he does. Oh boy, I'll tell you, blah blah blah, all that stuff. It's fun. I love it personally. I think it's great. But when there's something that is worth talking about in the fight, he snaps right back too, right? They bullshitted through the first minute and a half of the second round because it was just Tong pointing and Bruna standing there. 3 strikes aside from leg kicks for Brazil in round 1. This is unacceptable at the highest levels of this sport. Bruna Brazil attempted 1 takedown on Wang Tong, who is a kickboxer that we know needs work on the ground. It's just pathetic. I really don't want to be mean to this young lady, but she's carrying the banner of a fighting nerd. You would think that these fighting nerds would have a little bit more of an impact on this fighter, but they don't. I would think that she should be expelled from this gym if they want to keep up Gym of the Year status. Because of course, we talked at the end of last year about how the fighting nerds are the force to be reckoned with. Well, Bruna Brazil is taking the average down, and that ain't cool. John Dong, how you doing, brother? The way she turns over punches, she might be the only woman in the entire world training to actually strike. I mean, look, that could be, and that'll be a good advantage for Wang Tong. I mean, like she's proficient in that regard, and this was a nice easy fight for her to just get, her pointing off. I mean, like it was a nice showcase of her ability to go through 3 rounds and rack up points and, just tap her way through it. So I'm not mad at that. But I mean, Bruna just like she didn't toss anything. I mean, like 31 significant or 31 total strikes, all significant, they're saying, out of 64 attempts. Numbers, as we know, are inflated and bullshit. I mean, these numbers are awful. 1 attempted takedown that was not secured. I don't remember Wang Tong actually getting takedowns in this fight, but they're saying she got 2. Fucking, congratulations to her, I suppose. But it didn't need to happen. Wang Tong basically could have coasted through the second and third round. Like she could have been doing the same thing that Brazil was doing, because Brazil never turned up the offense at all. So it's like, if you want to sit back in the pocket after you've done enough in round 1 and this, just leave caution to the wind, maybe get enough points, to sway it on the cards, land enough shots. You want to think that everybody's going out there to finish these fights, but if you're not going to do that, and you're not getting anything back, if you're not getting any kind of opposition back at you, the hell's the point? What's the impetus that Wang Tong has to go out and finish a fight aside from being impressive to the fans? I don't know, but either which fucking way doesn't matter because she gets a really decent win here, just in the sense that it was all her. That's the only reason it was decent, because she was the only one doing anything. So congratulations to Wang Tong for getting back into the win column after the loss to Fernandez. But Bruna Brazil, I mean, what's her record looking like? Oh, she's candy caning like a motherfucker, dude. Yeah, I don't know, dude. Win over Molly McCann, and Molly McCann's a draw on the next London card. Oh, buddy. I don't know. I don't know about Bruna Brazil, y'all. I mean, I guess she's just one of those fighters that's going to stick around, but I really don't know if I care to see a performance like that again. And I said this, I mean, I didn't say the same thing, but I will say the same thing about Carol Hosa. Any fighter that's going to fight like that, I don't want to see it. And that fight right there was really kind of what exemplified the problem with this card as far as what everyone was complaining about before the fights took place. But, in the lead up to 312, everyone saying, oh, this card sucks so bad. It's really just about the main event and the co-main. There were a couple of other decent fights in there, a lot of hometown representation, but as a pay-per-view for big money tickets, I mean, I think that this was a little bit lackluster, and this fight right there definitely was a prime example of that. So just shit. Moving on to an okay fight. Again, this is where we're getting into the territory of somewhat of a lull here. The ebbs and flows of the card. We're in the thick of it right now, and this one was certainly part of that kind of middling, I would say. It wasn't a bad fight, but this is Tom Nolan versus Vyacheslav Borshov. A lot of pressure from Nolan. Two really nice early submission attempts that looked locked in, didn't complete either of them. That was unfortunate. I was a little bit I was keying into that because that paired with the pointing throughout and another, I believe he had a third submission attempt later in the fight that also didn't get cinched to the point of finishing. I'm worried about Tom Nolan having finishing power, period, or having the ability to finish a fight. Because if you had two very nice attempts, one looked like a Darce that should have just been instantly finished. I don't know how that first one, because what I'm counting as the three is that he had two in quick succession. It was one on the ground in the first round, then he had to readjust. I'll count that as the second, and then there was a third later in the fight, I think in the third round. Or possibly could have been the second. Either way, if you have all of those and all of those look really tight and really close to being finish worthy, and you don't finish off of any of those, then you're on the feet and you're really doing a lot of pointing is what it felt like to me. Again, another point fight situation here. I just would be concerned about Nolan having finishing ability. So anyway, good defensive work from Borshov, but it was too much following and not enough leading. I would say that was the note there. Nolan had a nice upkick in the third. That was cool. And then a lot more decent work off of his back. That was, I think, really where Borshov was getting shown up, because by the end of the fight, Tom Nolan was just chilling on his back on the ground, still winning the fight. That's not a good look. So, yeah, I mean, decent enough win for Tom Nolan. Tom Nolan is, between the last fight where he was the crazy favorite and barely squeaked by with a victory, and this fight where I was not overly impressed. I mean, this was not a great performance for Borshov either. So I'm not trying to make it seem like, oh, this was any kind of robbery or like that Nolan didn't do enough, I guess, because he did do enough, but it wasn't like impressive on either side. I'm not really too hot on Tom Nolan. I'm just going to be perfectly honest here. I'm not overly inspired by the way that this guy fights. And I mean, I'm going to need to see something more. You're going to need to win me over a little bit Same with Shara, the spinning double back fist, whatever, that kind of thing will turn the tides a little bit, but then he loses to MVP. I'm right back to square one. Tom Nolan, I feel, might be in the same spot. He gets these wins. They're fine. I'm not seeing world ender. I'm not seeing anything to hang my hat on here. And as far as Borshov goes, he's just going to be a guy that's just spotty, unfortunately to say, because I do like him as a fighter. I think he's a pretty good guy. Seems like a decent dude. Uh, Goes out there and tries. But again, in this fight, he was just following too much as opposed to leading the dance. And that was definitely a problem for him. Do you remember when Borshov got abused by a random guy who lost money on him and he was really apologetic? Yes, I do remember that. You've been a fan ever since because of that? Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's that sign of some humility, I can appreciate that. I certainly can. Also, very respectful post-fight for Tom considering he beat hey, all right. Borshov is not necessarily a nobody here, but he was very respectful. You are right. He did have some nice words to say about Borshov. I will give him that. I don't dislike Nolan as a person. You know what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with him personally. It's just the fight style is I need to see more. That's all that it comes down to. All right. Moving on along here. Jack Jenkins, Gabriel Santos. Jenkins drops Santos in the first round with a head kick. Santos stays calm on the ground, then gets the triangle locked in like a champion. How do you let that happen, Jack? You get this nice head kick, and then you go down and you're so wild and trying to finish the fight when the blood was not there in the water, even if you thought you were smelling it, to the point that you're in a triangle. I thought that was not the greatest look for Jack Jenkins. Jack was able to reverse it on the ground. So fine afterwards, I suppose. It was quite a sequence in the first round. But I was a little bit iffy on that from Jack in that first round because I was like, brother, you just got this head kick knockdown. And the way that you follow it up is immediately going to the ground. That part's fine, but you got to always have your wits about you with a dude like Santos whose ground game is top notch. So anyway, second round, the ref needed to shut the fuck up with the stay busy stuff, Santos was doing fine. I mean, the takedown was early and it was on the ground for a good amount of time. So I don't think that like I don't know. I think that maybe the referee was kind of was like coming from a fan perspective, like let's see more action. But Santos was doing stuff. He was doing plenty. He was smothering. He was striking. I guess maybe if the crowd was booing a little bit, maybe he was reacting to that. But the ref needed to stay out of it because Santos was doing just fine on the ground, even if it was for an extended period of time that was not necessarily leading to the submission. But front kick from Santos to start the third round was clean. Ends up taking the back, and you must tap, brother. So Santos gets the job done. Santos is a minus 220, comes through as the favorite. I would have liked to have seen Jenkins work a little harder for this one. I think that he might have gotten a little complacent after the head kick knockdown. Maybe that's just my perception. Perhaps I am completely off base with that, but I just was thinking, I'm like, you get that nice knockdown, and I just feel like he didn't put the sequence together properly thereafter to capitalize on it, which is why it went into the second and third rounds. And then from there, it was just, Santos able to turn the tides. Santos with that front kick, that thing was right on the money too. Really nice front kick from Santos. So that's really about it for that one. Good scrap. Good win for Gabriel Santos. And he is now on a 2-fight win streak. Okay, my bad. But losses to David Onama and Lerone Murphy are fine losses in my book. So, yeah, Santos, a name to remember if you can differentiate it from all of the other Santoses. All right. Keeping the train moving forward here. Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado. Kind of an underwhelming fight to start the main card. I think that this main card was pretty much underwhelming fights, to be perfectly honest. That's what I'm saying. You know, I'd say, like, I think I said 6.5 out of 10. I think it's more like a 6 on the nose for this card, mostly because these fights on the main card were kind of underwhelming. Nice boxing from Matthews against Prado. Decent work on the ground for Prado, but just not enough of it. Nice shots to the body for Matthews as well. He mixed it up nicely. Good movement. You know, again, good boxing. I mean, really, you know, just solid boxing affair from Jake Matthews. But I mean, again, fine win is all I can really say about it. Prado, just not enough coming out of him. I mean, these are the same notes a little bit, but like, there's only so many ways you can slice the cake on some of these fights here, you know? So good strikers affair, with a little bit of ground game from Santos. I mean, from a Prado. Sorry, my mistake. You know, decent little ground game there, but only got the one takedown, so not enough of it. And that's really all that it comes down to. Fine win for Jake Matthews, but at 21-7, it's just like, this is only hometown fan service as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is a fight I did not care to see or need to see necessarily. And then it didn't deliver in a way that made it like worth my while after the fact, which is the story of this card. Why everybody was so upset about 312 coming into this thing. So I really don't want to be overly negative about this card, but you got to be honest. And that, I think, is a big part of all of this, is that you have fights like this one where it's like, yeah, it was a fine fight. It was not a bad fight, but Jake Matthews and Francisco Prado are not household names. Jake Matthews, I guess, a veteran of Australia, if you want to say that. But like, congratulations, Sydney. You get to see a veteran fighter from your backyard. But was it worth? Was the value there? I don't know. So that's really all I got to say about that fight. Be perfectly honest, you know, these are the kind of fights that I need Chase here for, to actually like have a conversation about, because if not, I'm just going to run through them, because it's like, I don't really have anything else to say about it. Just a fine enough fight. Sometimes that's great. You know, on a fight night, this would have been, yeah, that was a decent fight night fight. People are paying $400 to be in the arena for this one. I think it's a little bit of a jib. I did want to make mention here, because it happened at this point in the broadcast. Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum goes into the fight wing of the Hall of Fame. I was very happy to see that. Obviously, a classic fight. And Israel Adesanya, of course, is going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame himself at some point in the near future, I'm sure. But as of right now, that fight, well deserving of being in the fight wing of the Hall of Fame. So good to see. Congratulations to both Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum. Beeb broke even on this card, 50 on Strickland and 50 on Waylay. Hey, breaking even sometimes is the best way to get out of it, my man. You know, there's nothing wrong with breaking even. It beats losing money. I actually made my money back on a lot of bad bets on this one. I was being a little reckless on this one for some reason, because the parlay from the previous card that worked out had put me back into the black. So I made a couple of reckless bets, but I ended up breaking even myself off of Duplessis and Waylay by decision each. So that worked out. Shout out to the Discord for that one. Actually, I believe that was Toby and Chase coming up with that one, and shout out to those guys, because that was the consolation parlay, and I'll talk about the co-main event in a little bit here, but yeah, I was able to cover because of that. All right, so as far as the next fight goes, Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato. Jimmy Crute with another draw. How crazy is that? 2 draws in his last 3 fights, the other draw being the loss in the rematch to Menefield. Sucks to be Jimmy Crute. He was contemplating retirement. I don't know, man. Perhaps retirement might have been the way to go. And it's nothing against Jimmy Crute. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I just don't think it's there for him. 12, 4, and 2 now. That's just kind of crazy. But Crute was really dominant in the first round. Almost had it finished. 10-8s across the board for that first round. Crute emptied too much of the tank in the first, though. Bellato came back nicely in the second and the third. And I mean, honestly, aside from that first round, it was kind of another underwhelming fight through those last 2. Bellato took those, in my opinion. So you ended up with a 29-27, a 28-28, and a 28-28. 2 out of 3 said it was a draw. Majority draw it is. Again, yeah, I mean, that's again really all that I got to say about it. I mean, it was a decent back and forth. Striking numbers were pretty solid, I would say. They were both trying. It's just that Crute really went too hard too early. And that sometimes is going to be the deciding factor in these fights if you don't get the job done. And of course, for Bellato on the other side of it, you get your confidence up after having taken this dude's best. I mean, he was in there trying to knock your fucking head off, and you weathered the storm. So congratulations to him, right? I mean, like, it's like, okay, I know that I don't have to worry too much about this now. I can just go through, and I've taken everything that he's got to give, and now it's time for me to do my own thing. So yeah, shout out to Bellato for that. But of course, now Bellato has the draw on his record too. Do they run it back? I would suspect not. I don't think that fight was entertaining enough to warrant a second one. I would suspect that Crute either takes way low level competition, or goes back to retirement. And as far as Bellato goes, I don't know. It's whatever. You know what like again, I like this is the problem with this card is that if these fighters who are not on solid trajectories, like if they're not fighting out there to change your mind, then your mind is already made up. You know what I mean? Like if they don't change it for the positive, then it stays for the meh, if that makes sense. I'm not going to suddenly gain some kind of greater appreciation for the fighting of Rodolfo Bellato because there was nothing in there that showed me that I needed to. Just a standard decent fight, just a regular fight night fight that went to a draw. So yeah, not overly impressed, unfortunately, but we'll see what ends up happening. I don't know. Maybe they'll book these guys. Yeah, maybe they will run that one back. Who knows? I would highly doubt it, though. All right. Pushing on to the featured bout here. We had Justin Tafa versus Taliesin Teixeira. Really nice kick from Teixeira. I think that the finish of this fight overshadowed the fact that he was able to swing that huge tree trunk leg of his very quickly and very heavily into Justin Tafa before he lands the close range elbow. But the nice kick starts it off for Teixeira. Then a heavy close range elbow smashes Tafa's nose in. One of 2 broken noses that we would see on the evening. And that was all she wrote. After that, one of your other few finishes that we had on this card. Only a couple of them this time. But Taliesin Teixeira gets one of those finishes, and it was a nice finish. I believe that we need to enter a post-Aussie region era at heavyweight. As much as I like these guys as people, as much as I am a fan, I think that the Australia, New Zealand region of the world, it's just not keeping up when it comes to their heavyweight fighters. I think that Mark Hunt was successful in his time and place because it was his time and place. Any of these guys now would probably have some decent success back in Mark Hunt's time. In the current landscape of this sport, these guys who have no ground game and really are just out there to kill or be killed are getting killed. I think that that's pretty much what happened here. Teixeira was able to get in there close, saw that the opening was there for the elbow, lands the elbow, smashes the nose in. That's all she wrote. Could that happen to anybody? Sure. But I think that there's just a lot of evidence at this point that the Tafa brothers and Tai Tuivasa, like these guys they're just not it at heavyweight. So that's pretty much that, unfortunately. And again, I'm not happy to say that. I like these guys as people. I mean, I think the Shuey thing is a little bit gross, but power to them. It's something noticeable that people enjoy watching, I guess. They got personalities. They seem cool. These Samoan guys generally are down for a scrap, so it's not like they're not tough. But at the higher levels of the sport, it's kill or be killed, and these guys get killed. Shout out to Talishan Teixeira coming off the Contender Series, getting a really nice win to start off his run in the UFC. Mark Hunt had a 50-50 record and 0 ground game. Yeah, exactly. This is exactly what I'm saying. Mark Hunt was good for his time and place. These guys would be good for that time and place too. That time is not now. That time is past. These guys are still fighting like they're back in that era. That era is long gone. So we need to either have these guys start graduating towards a higher level of mixed martial arts, or we just need to move on, sad to say. And I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of guys from Australia and New Zealand that can figure that out. There are plenty of big guys down there. It's just a matter of whether or not they're actually going to put the work in to get great. I'm sure that it can happen in the future. All I'm saying is the current crop, they ain't it. So Talisman Teixeira is giving Jamal Hill a run for his money in the terrible chest tattoo department. Did want to mention that. That spider is awful. We talked about that a little bit on the watch along. It is quite a statement when he's got some other better tattoos. Why you would put something that terrible dead center of your chest in a line of work where you're shirtless all the time, I couldn't say. But regardless, he did. He's got it. He's stuck with it. And now we're stuck with it. Anyway. All right. Let's move on to the co-main event. This was something that made me pretty sad. Pretty sad is the note that I have about this fight because I was 100% all in on Tatiana Suarez. I really thought that she was going to be the world ender that I had kind of built her up in my mind to be. I thought she was going to deliver. And when I saw Tatiana get that open water takedown in the first round, I was like, this is it. This is what I was expecting and hoping for. Then she jumped guillotine, and I was like, no. And then it did not get better from there. So Suarez takes round 1, but didn't accomplish much outside of control, which for round 1, it's like, okay, that's not the worst thing in the world. She's wearing her down, but Zhang Weilei is a cardio machine. So nothing problematic for her in that regard. The problem was that Suarez started gassing herself out with all of that effort she was putting in. She looked tired very early into this fight, I would say, probably by midway through the second round, if not beginning of the third round. She was working very hard for very little return early in the fight. And that, I think, was a major undoing in her department. Because, I mean, she is really technically proficient. She was able to hang in there through a lot of what Zhang Weilei was bringing to the table. Obviously, it still went to decision, but I don't know. I think that the gas tank was the issue there, and it's probably also for the fact that this was her first 5-round fight. She's got to make sure the conditioning is there to make that all work. I mean, to be able to stick it out for the entire fight. She's only used to 3-round fights. Those extra 10 minutes, that's a heavy, heavy burden. So early in the second round, Tatiana cut her knee on the bottom of the cage, going for a takedown, and that was pretty nasty. That cut was not great. It was not a good look. A lot of blood coming out of it. Just kind of a freak accident sort of situation, a la John Jones catching his toe in the cage in one of those, in his fight there back in the day. I mean, I think that again, not a good look optically, but it just kind of was what it was. But it was pretty nasty to look at. Um, but so in that sequence, though, when she was going for the takedown, which cut her knee, Weilei scrambled out and ended up controlling the situation there, which is unfortunate. She putting all of that effort in. That's basically what I was just saying. Going back to that point, it's like she's putting in all of this effort. Unfortunately, ends up cutting her knee because of it, and then Weilei just ends up in control thereafter. Unfortunate. Conversation about whether the cut was pre-existing or not. No, the cut was not pre-existing. We had talked about that a little bit on the watch along. I didn't realize that Tatiana Suarez did have some prior knee injuries. I thought that her injuries in the past were to her clavicle, but apparently I was mistaken about that. She had been dealing with knee injuries, but those injuries were not anything to do with the cut that she got during that takedown attempt. So there was nothing doing in that regard as far as it being a pre-existing cut. From round 2 on, basically, it was all Zhang Weilei. Huge staggering shot lands in the third round for Weilei. That was when I was really concerned, because I was like, at that point, we're only in the third round. Tatiana Suarez is looking tired. Weilei is able to negate everything that she's trying to do on the ground, or at least, before getting to the ground in the wrestling exchanges. She's negating all of that, and then she's landing power shots. No bueno. Weilei was just too fast for Tatiana to effectively get a game plan together once the gas tank was zapped. And it really was a hard watch going into those fourth and fifth rounds, just seeing Tatiana Suarez essentially hanging on for dear life, which is really what it felt like towards the end of the fight. Fourth round was the first takedown that Suarez has ever surrendered in the UFC, which goes to show you why I was so hyped on her in the first place. Because up until then, up until the fourth round, everything that was on the ground was initiated by Tatiana. So obviously she is no slouch, which I really hope is the perception that is taken away here. It was a dominant victory for Weilei. This certainly was 4-1. So I'm not trying to say that this was not the Weilei show. And for anybody who took her at plus money, yeah, that was free money for sure. Shame on me, even though I did end up taking her in the consolation parlay, and that worked out. So glad that I at least had that good sense. But I do think that Tatiana Suarez is still a force to be reckoned with. The first time she had ever been taken down in all of her fights was in the fourth round of a title fight. Something to note. Really, I would have liked to have seen Suarez open up with her hands, but the speed advantage was always there for Zhang. So who knows if it would have helped, Zhang Weilei is so goddamn crisp and effective with her striking. The speed in general is just too much for a lot of these girls to handle. And that's why she's the champ. That's why she's making the conversation about the GOAT list heat up in general, right? If Waylay versus Valentina happens, you got a crisp hundo on Waylay at 125. I mean, yeah, I could see that being the case, dude. Look, if Valentina lost to Grasso and then gets it back by laying on her at Noche, which is really all she did. I mean, it was just control. Kind of a boring fight. I don't think that Zhang Weili is going to let that happen. If she didn't let Tatiana Suarez do it, I don't see why she would let Valentina do it. So, yeah, I mean, what can Zhang Weili not do? I mean, she's just her. One judge, 49-45, my girl Tatiana Suarez. Cry emoji on that one. Jesus Christ. 10-8 round in there somewhere. So, I mean, Zhang Weili reigns supreme, and there's a reason for it. And that's all she wrote on that one. It was a very impressive performance overall. It was a great example of the veteran ability to stay in a fight and not let adversity sway the course of action. Because when she got taken down in that first round, I was concerned. I wasn't concerned. I was thinking things were going to go different. Concerned for Waylay. I was like, oh, this could be it. This could really be it right now. We could be seeing the changing of the guard, but that was not to be. And that's because Zhang Weilei did not get mentally shaken. Zhang Weilei, who has been mentally shaken in the past, if you recall. If you recall, Zhang Weilei was trying to make the case that the head kick loss that she took to Rose Namajunas was because of the crowd booing her for being Chinese. Not a great excuse, but if that was even, that might have just been an excuse. But if that was even a kernel of truth in her mind that she actually believed that, that's a little sign of slight mental weakness, I would say. So it's not like she is unshakable mentally, but in a fight like that, all things equal, stays the course, does the damn thing, and gets the win. So the champ is here. The champ at women's strawweight has a name. Thoughts on the recent Bryce Mitchell controversy? Bro, I've done 5 hours of Bryce Mitchell content on this channel at this point. If you're talking about the Jackson podcast, though, I have not heard it, and apparently I'm not going to get to hear it because apparently they deleted the Jackson podcast episode. If anybody has that episode downloaded somewhere, let me know because I would certainly like to throw it up on the channel. I'd do another watch along of that. Who knows? They might copyright strike me for it if they specifically took it down. Luckily, Bryce Mitchell kept his Arc Insanity on Rumble. So my video has not been taken down just yet, but we'll see if it ends up happening in the future because it very well might. But no, I have not heard. I heard a little bit based on like text, so I didn't really hear it. I saw, a couple of quotes from the Jackson podcast, but I was not able to hear it. And like I said, if you want to hear my full thoughts on Bryce, go back to I think it's the last video that I released on the channel. And then there's a stream of me watching the entire Arc Insanity podcast on stream live. So check all that out. Moving on to the main event of this card here, Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. I mean, what can you say about Dricus? Does the damn thing. This fight went exactly as I anticipated it would go. Sean changed nothing except for his output, which I dare say was lower than the first fight, which is amazing to be able to say because he's already a low output fighter. At the start of this fight, DC on commentary said Strickland needed to be more aggressive in this fight and not let Dricus lead the dance. Well, he did exactly the opposite of that. I mean, Strickland, for even as low output, teep, jab, shell as Strickland has become in his fights, this was even lower than that. Like, this was even less output than that. Strickland was sitting pretty for a lot of this fight. I mean, he was moving his hands, he was throwing the push kick, he was teeping, but really, it wasn't enough. He was a sitting duck a lot of the times. He wasn't following up with anything past the initial jab. So it's like Dricus really had wide open spaces to do whatever the fuck he wanted. Plus, Dricus already pressures awkwardly anyway, so it was a bad combination for Sean. Quack, quack, baby, sitting duck over here. You know who I felt worse for than anybody when it came to this fight was Eric Nixick, Sean Strickland's coach. Not getting what he wanted out of Sean. Don't let him be first and don't let him in there for free, were the notes that Nixick was giving. Strickland did exactly that. Don't let him get in there for free. That's all Dricus was doing, was getting in there for free. Basically saying, if Dricus is going to come in, give him a shot for it. The countering was not there for Sean. Sean got a couple at select times, but it was really just a lackluster performance from Strickland, who is selling wolf tickets when it comes to how he sells fights in the first place. Dean Thomas had a great quote about this, and actually, shout out to On Point MMA for their analysis of it too. Tommy Tohold saying he's tired of seeing this shit too. I am in that same exact camp. Everybody is tired of Sean Strickland's bullshit. When it comes to, I'm going to go out there and make this a war, we're going to bleed, yada, yada. It's like, yeah, bro, you're going to go out there and get your nose broke. That's entertaining enough. But as far as it being a back and forth banger war, you ain't that guy. Or at least you're not now. The guy that used to be that guy is long gone, it seems like. Where's the guy that fought Jack Hermanson? Thing of the past. Yeah, I felt very bad for Eric Nixick. You could see how frustrated he was getting. Strickland getting a little frustrated himself, but it's like, bro, why don't you try to adjust? Why don't you try to take down? You have this fucking man dance pact that did nothing for you. Did not suit you or serve you. So you don't adjust at all. Dricus goes for the one takedown. Didn't really make too much of a difference, but at least it showed that he was mixing it up. Strickland did nothing but exactly what he always does. His iCarly stance and all of the trappings that come with that. And get his nose broken. Not fun. Not fun to see. Strickland did turn up for a moment. A fleeting moment. Midway through the third round. He had a couple of good overhands at that point. But that was about it. Fourth round early, right hand breaks Strickland's nose, and it becomes a bloody, bloody mess. Quite a bloody affair indeed. That would be what I would call a shape shifter of a nose strike. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with a little clef in the nose after that one, even though he did reset it himself. But by the fifth round, he was looking like one of those Groucho Marx big nose and bushy eyebrows glasses masks, Because his nose was swollen the fuck up. Good thing he did not blow out. Had he blown out of his nose, his orbitals would have swollen up to the point of looking like pufferfish, and he would have basically ended up getting taken out of the fight. That would have been a doctor's stoppage. So good that he did the right thing by not blowing out. Kind of cool that he was able to reset his own broken nose. And obviously, shout out to Strickland for being such a tough guy. He took a lot of damage in that fight. But what's the difference? That's really what it comes down to. What is the difference? You can be one tough punching bag. I call it Felicia Spencer syndrome because that's exactly what it is. You can be a tough punching bag, but what difference does it make when you've got Dricus over there doing his thing? It's nice to be fodder for the lion. You're the Roman in the Colosseum. Congratulations. You made it to gladiator status and you got ate by the lion at the top of the pack. So I don't see any real value to this fight. I think it was kind of bullshit that we had to sit through this as opposed to getting the Khamzat fight while Khamzat is healthy. Every day we're wondering when Khamzat's going to be hospitalized again. So Khamzat gets put on the back burner for this unnecessary rematch, even though the first match Was close. Yes, I'll give it to you. Sean did a lot better in that first match, but dude, he was off as fuck in this one. People are saying, oh, it was the staph infection. I don't care what it was. The staph infection definitely did look real, and it did look pretty bad. I mean, you saw the fucking crater that he had on his arm. Looked like he had a nipple growing out of his arm. So it was bad. But whatever the reasoning is, you take the fight, you're in the fight. This is the fight that you come with. You know, and again, credit to Strickland. He's not an excuse making guy necessarily, even though he did make a couple of them after he lost the belt. But, you know, he in his post fight, he just said, hey, you know, it was a pleasure to bleed for you guys, all that kind of stuff. He's got a big fan base in Australia. So it was all fine. He's playing to the crowd. No problem with any of that. He's not out here bitching and moaning. But regardless of the staph infection or whatever other factors went into how this fight played out, it was not a great look. And it was not, it did not make this fight worth. You feel me? Where is the value? Where is the value in this? Where is the value in this rematch? There was none. So, as far as this card went, I think that it was a really unfortunate deal for the Australians in Sydney. Because there were some decent performances. Yeah, if you're a Rodrigues fan, you got to see him style out. That was nice. You got to see him break a guy's nose. You know, even he was talking about how he was kind of upset that he was that he didn't finish the fight, that he was taking it to a decision. So, you know, you're not alone in that thinking there. But Sean is a tough guy. So, I mean, okay, at least you got to find value somewhere in this thing. And Cody Steele versus Rongju should not be the value in a pay-per-view. Getting more and more mad about this card the longer I talk about it, really. I'm downgrading it to a 5. No, I'm just kidding. It's still a 6 out of 5. But either way, this was not a great main event, in my opinion. So, Dricus says he's top 3 pound for pound. Is that true? That's the question that I have right now. Is that true? Well, let's take a look at the rankings real quick. As far as pound for pound goes, you've got Islam, John Jones, and Pereira. He did call out Pereira. If he fights Pereira and beats Pereira, I think that he certainly takes that slot. He's number 7 right now. Yeah, I think that that's probably appropriate. Yeah, no, but top 5, says Toby. Yeah, I think that he's got to go through Alex before he can get top 3, for sure. So, I think that pretty much closes it out. I really like. I was not super happy with the main event for the reasons that I just described. It was not a back and forth banger of a fight, and it was just a kind of a skills display from Dricus without a ton of opposition coming back. So, do you think Strickland versus Jamal would sell? Would it sell? I mean, as a main event, probably not. Um, that would be a solid co-main for a pay-per-view, or yeah, I mean that's pretty much what you would have it as a solid co-main for a pay-per-view, or like a featured fight for a really good pay-per-view, maybe. But I don't think that I mean, unless either of them have a belt, it's definitely not gonna be main eventing anything unless you put that main event for a fight night. But I don't know. I don't know if anybody really cares too much to see that fight. Plus, I think they're training partners actually, so or they have trained together in the past at some point. So I don't know if they would want to fight each other, but does it sell? I don't know if Strickland sells any fucking fights right now, based on the way that he's been fighting. Like, is anybody clamoring for another Sean Strickland fight after seeing that fight? Is anybody like, yo, dude, man, sucks that he lost, but bro, I can't wait to see him in the cage again? No. He's a fucking edgelord outside of the cage, and then he goes in the cage and does not perform. It's what we always say about narratives in this sport. None of it matters if you don't win your fights. So he's creating his own narrative right now with the way that he's fighting. Being an edgelord outside the cage is great if you back it up with quality fights, then people might give a little bit of a fuck about all your asinine political takes or even your based political takes, which he occasionally has one or two of. But I don't care about anything that you have to say if that's how you're fighting. So, long roundabout way, does that any of that sell? You tell me. Would you pay for it? Um, Honestly, wouldn't mind Sean versus Izzy too. I mean, I wouldn't mind it if Izzy wants to stick around, but again, I'm not clamoring for it. I'm not like hyped for it. I think it would be nice to see Izzy be able to get his win back if he's about it still like that. But it's not something that I'm going out of my way to like tripping over myself to say, yeah, really tee that one up, Dana. So anyway, that is UFC 312 Duplessis versus Strickland 2. Overall, a slightly disappointing card, I would say, but not terrible. Like I said, I'd give it a solid 6 out of 10. Couple of good performances, one really decent banger fight, and two pretty sadly predictable main and co-main. I mean, predictable for some people in the co-main, but uh, both going to decision. Not anything to write home about necessarily. You would absolutely pay for Strickland versus Jamal in the co-main. Yeah, as a co-main. Exactly. What's that main event looking like? You know what I mean? All right. Moving on. Let's take a quick look at next week. We've got a bunch of weeks now coming up, all fights. So, I mean, we are going to be locked in. Hopefully, we can resurrect Chase from the dead, get him back to the land of the living, and he will be back to talk about some of these fights. But we've got a bunch of weeks of fights coming up, and it is all going down next week with Jared Cannonier and Gregory Rodrigues. This is I like this. I like this fight, honestly. I am a fan of both of these guys. Both of them hitting a little bit of skid territory lately. I mean, I think Rodrigues won his last fight, but it was not impressive. Yeah, it was the one against oh shoot, my bad. He's on a 3-fight win streak. No, okay. It was just I guess I was just thinking that like the Chris Duncan fight was not that great of a performance for Rodrigues. All right, my bad. They're not Cannonier, not so much, but he's been in a couple of really decent wars. Cannonier, you want to talk about a fighter who will go to war? Cannonier should talk the shit that Sean Strickland talks. Cannonier will take it to a fucking war. Cannonier went to war with Kyle Bahayo. That was a great fight. So this fight right here, I would really, 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 really like to see Jared Cannonier get a little bit of his aura back. I mean, the dude's only got maybe a couple more years left. He is certainly on the tail end of his career. One of those guys that kissed greatness but never fully achieved it. And Rodrigues, a dude who's a little bit more on the come up, I would say. Only 32 years old. Looks like he's 47. But Jared at 40 years old, I think that it would just be nice to see him get a nice win. And then honestly, if he wants to retire at that point, that would probably be okay. I'd like to see him get a win in this fight, go out on top, lay the gloves down. I think that would work out just fine. So I am going to tentatively be picking Rodrigues in this fight. I'll probably throw a parlay together with Cannonier on it for short money, but I'm not super confident in it because Cannonier, I think that the best days are behind him, even though he still will go to war. So I do think that he has the potential to bring a war to Rodrigues, but it's just a matter of how Rodrigues is able to navigate that. So we'll see what ends up happening with that one, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of Jared Cannonier. Who else we got on this thing? Calvin Kattar versus Youssef Zalal. That is a banger fight as far as Youssef Zalal is concerned, because Calvin Kattar is a dude who I think needs to probably get the hell out of like ranked territory Where is Calvin Kattar ranked at right now? Because he is ranked still, right? Or is he not? Did he drop off the rankings? I mean, I'm not seeing anything about rankings right now for him. Maybe they did. Maybe they did. Maybe they dropped him out the rankings. Hold on. Let me go back over to my handy list here of everybody. They are fighting at bantam weight, right? Or they're fighting at featherweight. Yeah, they're fighting at featherweight. Okay, so Calvin Kattar is number 10 right now. Yeah, Calvin Kattar needs to not be number 10 anymore. Yusuf Zalal, on the other hand, definitely needs to be number 10. Yusuf Zalal has been crushing lately. I am really a big fan of Zalal in these last couple of fights. He's been looking like a whole new person compared to his first run in the organization, and he has been styling. He's been doing it with great flair ever since he styled the hell out of his fight with Billy Quarantillo. He has been rocking and rolling over here. So I think that this is going to be a great fight for Yusuf Salal. Going to be a really nice win for him here. That's going to get him into the top 10 very nice and easily. Calvin Kattar looked like absolute ass in his fight against Aljamain Sterling. So perhaps Calvin Kattar was not really that guy to begin with, because as you can see here, Calvin Kattar on a 3-fight losing streak. He's 1-4 in his last 5. That is not good. Granted, you see the strength of the 4 that he lost to: Aljamain Sterling, Arnold Allen, Josh Emmett, Max Holloway. That's nothing to sneeze at for sure. But 4 losses is 4 losses when your only win is Giga Chikadze. That's yeah, that's not great. So I think that this is Yusuf Zalal's time. Yusuf Zalal is 28 years old. This is his second stint in the organization. He left. He came back looking fresher than ever in his return, and he's been doing no wrong in my eyes since. He has been looking great. And he's a guy who can do it however the fuck he wants. He'll backpack you and submit you that way, take it to the ground, do it there. He'll strike with you. Yusuf Zalal is a dude that I'm very high on right now. So very much looking forward to this fight. And obviously my backing is going for Yusuf Zalal at a minus 450. He better fucking deliver. Moving on down the line, Edmund Shabazian versus Dylan Budka. Shabazian looking terrible in his last fight against GM3. I mean, they didn't look terrible. He started off okay in that fight, but just Gerald Meerschaert is that guy always. So we know how that goes. Budka, on the other hand, I wish that Chase was here to talk about this one, because Budka is a dude that he is not too fond of, because Budka fights like a bit of a dummy. 2-loss streak, 2-fight losing streak over here. After a win on the Contender Series, he is 0-2 in the organization proper. So Budka, somehow, we were talking about that after his last loss. Somehow he ended up getting a contract extension, and we were like, how the hell did that happen? So right now, Budka needs to either win or get the fuck out of here. And this is exactly the type of fight that I believe that Edmund Shabazian can win. So a minus 390, I think that that's accurate. Let him ride that one out. I think that favorites on this one are probably going to be pretty safe bets. But it is, of course, MMA, so anything can happen. But if you want the easy one for short money, or basically no money at all, Yusuf Zalal and Edmund Shabazian, those are probably locks. Moving on to Ismail Bonfim, the other Bonfim brother. He is 4-1 in his last fight, with his only loss being to Benoit Saint Denis. Of course, he is 24-4 total. So, I mean, this is a pretty solid record overall for Bonfim. Versus Sadikov. Sadikov is a beast, though, dude. Like Sadikov went to see. Okay, so I'm gonna say this, and I can already hear what's coming back in the chat, but I will say it anyway. Sadikov and Vyacheslav Borsov went to a draw that was one of the most entertaining fights that I can think of in recent memory. That was either last year or 2 years ago, but I think it was last year. Nazim Sadikov versus Vyacheslav Borsov was a fantastic fight, bloody affair. Both these guys putting it all on the line. It was a very entertaining fight, and Sadikov is beastly. So, is he going to be able to best Ismail Bonfim, whose only loss recently was to Benoit Saint Denis? That's a tough call. I would think what's going to happen here is that it's going to be very grapple heavy, and that Bonfim will probably have a good amount of advantage in that department. Um, okay, maybe I take that back. Maybe not a good amount of advantage, but I do believe that it's going to be a very back and forth set of exchanges. Can he get the advantage? Yes, I do think so. So I'm going to tentatively ride with Ismail Bonfim on this one, but it's tight. You see, I mean, like it's almost a pick 'em. So Sadikov as a dog, that might be good money. That might be good money. That would probably be one that I would put in a secondary parlay, or maybe just throw a straight on, to be perfectly honest. Because I mean, Sadikov he's beastly, bro. He has beast tendencies. Saying the draw with Borshov was great. Submitting of Terrence McKinney, whatever. But I mean, the dude is wrecking shop over here. Knockout, 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 submission, finishing all of his fights, and then going to a crazy knockdown, drag out draw with Barshov. He has beast tendencies. So could he win this fight? He could. I would say that he could. 29 and 30 years old. I mean, both these guys, the stats are pretty goddamn close right now. I mean, he doesn't even really have much of a height or reach advantage. Slight advantages, slight reach advantage for Bonfim, slight height advantage for Sadikov. I mean, this is a pretty down the line even fight. So if it's going skill for skill and it's going to get into some really grapple heavy exchanges, I would say Bonfim probably has a little bit of a leg up in that department if he wants to go that route, which I hope that he does. But we'll see. Borshov is a bum. We only like him because he's a nice guy. Bullshit. Go back and rewatch that fight. It was really good. So I will tentatively take Bonfim in this one, but like I said, secondary parlay with Sadikov on it. Moving on, Rodolfo Vieira versus Andre Petroski. I have made a pact with myself that I would not be betting on Andre Petroski fights. I think that he is just a lay and pray guy for the most part. He's really not very impressive to me. Rodolfo Vieira is the black belt hunter, 10-2. I would say that he's got the advantage on this one. But I would stay away from it because if Petroski can get him down and lay on top of him, then there is potential for him to do just that. So I'm not a huge fan of Petroski, as I'm sure that you can tell by the way that I'm talking about him. I would not be confident in placing a bet on him. But I would stay away from this fight altogether personally because Petroski somehow, some way, occasionally will figure out a way to eke out a victory. As you can see, I mean, 3-2 in his last 5. I mean, one of those being the hip knockout of Jacob Malkoun. Very strange. So I don't know. I'm not impressed by Andre Petroski, but he occasionally will figure out a way to win that you weren't expecting. So bet at your own risk. But Rodolfo Vieira should be able to take that fight. All right. Connor Matthews versus Jose Delgado. Jose Delgado. Do I know that guy? Name does not immediately spring to mind. Win over Juarez on the he's a Contender Series guy. Okay. Yeah, I'd have to rewatch his fight to remember. Is Matthews also a Contender Series guy? Oh, no, he's the dude that lost to Bazookia. But if I recall, yeah, it was a TKO in the third round, but it was I seem to remember that being a somewhat decent fight before that. So maybe I'm just misremembering all of that. But um, I mean, look, Jose Delgado coming in off the Contender Series. We've talked about that in the past. Guys losing coming off of the Contender Series is not uncommon. Matthews with a little bit more experience there as far as being in the organization goes, but he's coming off a loss himself. More fights overall for Delgado. Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a toss up here, I would say. But I believe Delgado was the dude that's got the goth girlfriend, and he actually was pretty impressive in his fight. I might be mistaking him for a different guy, but um, I just remember him being pretty solid as far as like going in there and wanting to duke it out. So I'll tentatively give the nod to the Contender Series guy, but that is a very, very big asterisk that coming into the organization, it's like a 40% win rate or something like that. So I wouldn't be super confident in it, is all I'm saying there. But I'll give the slightest of nods to him with the understanding that Matthews could certainly pull that out. Speaking of fighters that I have told myself I would never bet on again, Angela Hill versus Ketlin Sosa. Ketlin Sosa, of course, the fighter who got decimated on Noche after the trading of kicks to the cooch. Yeah. Oh wait, no, she was the fighter who decimated. My mistake. It was Hagari who got decimated. Sorry. Take it back here. I'm fractionally remembering things. So I need Chase here to keep me on track with this stuff. But no. Yeah, Yasmin Hagari was the one that got decimated by Ketlin Sosa. She's got decent knockout power. I would say that Sosa should probably take this fight. I mean, Angela Hill, 17 and 14, 40 years old. Ketlin Sosa coming off of a really, really solid win. Granted, against lesser competition. Come on. It's got to be that, right? Like, it's got to be. Let some fucking conventional wisdom actually be correct every once in a while, for fuck's sake. But I say all of that to say that every time that I have counted Angela Hill out, she is the parlay buster. Her, Anthony Smith, Petrosky, they're all parlay busters. So bet at your own risk, but I would really like to believe that if the MMA gods are like, pulling the strings the way that you think that they're going to pull them, that Ketlin Sosa would be the one. Cooch kicks indeed. What up, checkmate? Yeah, there were two. There were cooch kicks on both sides. They were trading them. It was a double cooch kick affair. But yeah, so anyway, I think that Caitlin Sosa should be able to fucking win this fight, but who the hell knows? I mean, Angela Hill just somehow, some way will win fights occasionally. She's been looking kind of shaky in her last couple, or at least checkered. Because I mean, she's on a 2-fight losing streak now. Oh no, she's 1-1 in her last 2. So I mean, lost to Tabitha Ricci, nothing doing there. Beat Luana Pinheiro, not super impressive to me. Luana Pinheiro probably should get cut at some point. Win over Denise Gomes, that's fine. But the Mackenzie Dern fight where she lost, that was a really solid performance for Mackenzie Dern. So that's what I'm saying. 3-2 in her last 5. She is as checkerboard as they come. I cannot put my backing on Angela Hill as much as I think that she's an awesome person with a very nice personality. I like every time that I bet on her, she loses. Every time I don't, she wins. Yeah, and 40 years old as well. Exactly. Sosa only 30, coming off of a great win. I think that you got to go with the conventional wisdom on this one. Until the MMA gods laugh at you. All right, moving on down the line here. Rafael Esteban versus Jesus Aguilar. Jesus Aguilar is coming off of a win. Yes, I remember that. Beat Nickel. Forgot that he also beat Mendoza, I believe how that's pronounced. So yeah, Aguilar is slightly beastly here. 4-1 in his last fight, or last five rather. And Rafael Estevam. Do I know the name? I mean, I should know the goddamn name. Look at that record. 12-0, undefeated. Beat Charles Johnson. Holy shit, what the hell? How do I not remember this guy? Just a dude who did not stick out in my mind. Well, this is going to be quite a fight here. Aguilar coming in with a nice streak here, and Rafael Estevam also with a nice streak, an unbeaten one at that. So, I think that I think you got quite a barn burner in potential here. But I mean, they got Estevam as a huge favorite. Uh, is that the way to go? This one I don't know too much about, so I will withhold judgment. But I'll side with Vegas on this one. But plus 300 money for a dog that could bark. Bet at your own risk. Could be beneficial. Who knows? We'll find out on Saturday. But a dude on a 12 fight win streak, everyone's got to lose at some point. That's the other side of the equation. So potential for that to be the case as well. Tentative backing of Estevam. The other Bonfim brother, Gabriel Bonfim versus Chaos Williams. I like Chaos Williams, man. Chaos Williams has a very fan-friendly style. I would like to see him win this fight. That being said, these Bonfim brothers are pretty goddamn good. Both of them with losses now, and of course, Gabriel just took his loss not too long ago to Nicholas Dalby. Win over Angelosa doesn't really do too much for me. He really likes to stand, it seems like, Gabriel Bonfim. Like, he's got, we were just talking about this earlier in the stream. He's one of those guys. He's got the wrestling, he's got the grappling, he just doesn't like to use it. Well, if he's not going to use it and he's going up against a guy like Chaos Williams, who is a striker and will ox fight the fuck out of you, I will take the dog money here. I'm going to go with Chaos Williams. I think it's a little bit of a risky bet, but I'm taking it. Vince Morales versus Elijah Smith. Elijah Smith coming off of the Contender Series. That's a name I remember from the Contender Series. Vince Morales, a dude who is back in the UFC for a second stint and has not been looking great. Yeah. Left the organization for a while, lost to Taylor Lapilus. That to me is not a great loss to take. I think that Elijah Smith is going to come out here and catch a very nice, clean body. 22 years old and looked amazingly good on the Contender Series. I would be putting my money behind Elijah Smith. There's a reason that he's a minus 235 in this fight. So I like that fight, though. It's going to be a nice coming out party for Elijah Smith, get himself established in the organization. Walter Walker versus Dontel Mays. This is a fight everybody wanted. Heavyweights nobody cares about. Walter Walker got that dumb win over Junior Tafa, right? Wasn't it Junior in that one? Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a dumb win. It was a verbal submission. Fine, whatever. Tafa is what it is. Walker, the lesser brother. We talked about that earlier in the stream too. Not super impressed by Walter Walker. Also not very impressed by 11-7 Dontel Mays. Don't really care too much about this fight. I'll go with Walter Walker. He's 12-1, heavy favorite. Well, not super heavy, but minus 220, heavy enough favorite. I'll go with Walker on that. And starting the card off, little Julia Avila versus Jacqueline Cavalcante. Jacqueline. Cavalcante was she's on this great win streak, but has not ever looked amazing. Avila, what's her record looking like? Yeah, I mean 3-2, or 3-2 in her last five, with a loss to Misha Tate being her last. I don't see any reason why she can't win this fight, to be perfectly honest. I would think that this should be the fight that stops Cavalcante's win streak. Cavalcante did not look amazing in that last fight. In fact, I even remember thinking that it might have been in slight petty theft territory that last fight that she fought. So if that's the case, and that's my memory and that's my recollection there, I'm going to side with Julia Avila as a plus 360 underdog, heavy underdog with a minus 525 from Cavalcante. That might be your underdog money on this card. Women's MMA coming through again to make 0 cents could be the big money maker. So that is what we've got coming up next week, and I am certainly looking forward to it. I like this card a lot, actually. Honestly, I like this card better than 312 based on what we just saw from 312. I don't mean to keep shitting on 312, but 312 was shit on worthy, in my opinion. So it is what it is. You know what I mean? Um, this card has some good potential, especially for an Apex card. So we'll be back at the Apex. And of course, I will be live to watch along with all of you guys on this very channel, youtube.com/@Yama Show. Be hanging out with the Vitz King. We'll be watching these fights with you guys there. Hopefully, I'm praying that I can make it work, but I think I should be able to. I'm going to try to get a Yama episode out this week about 312. So keep an eye on the channel for that. Hopefully some other stuff going on as well. You know, I've been dealing with some medical stuff, just some minor stuff, but it's just been annoying. So I've been a little laid up lately, but unlike other people dealing with medical stuff, I still show up to the show. So I'm definitely going to show up to the watch along. Hopefully the videos will follow as well. There's always new stuff coming out on the channel. Next week, a week from today, we will be talking about all of the fights coming up on this card, Cannonier versus Rodrigues, right here on last week's fights. Hopefully myself and Chase Parton. That will start at 9 o'clock. If it does not start at 9, it'll start later than 9. And I will always let you know about the start times on Instagram and on Twitter at Yama Show on both of those platforms. So make sure you're following me on there. Make sure that you are keeping your eye on the channel for new content coming out soon. And I will catch up with you later in the week. Everybody, have a great rest of the week until we meet again. And as always, fight on.
Game.